and welcome to some special coverage on the Australian election. I'm Thomas Porteous and you are watching NewsX World. Australia is heading to the polls today for a high-stakes federal election that pits incumbent Prime Minister Anthony Albanese against opposition leader Peter Dutton. Australians have been casting their ballots in early voting since this morning, with more than 8.5 million people voting by pre-poll or postal votes before election day, a considerable jump on the 2022 election. Albanese, who led Labour to power in 2022, faces his first major re-election test. His opponent, Conservative Liberal leader Peter Dutton, who is campaigning hard on cutting public spending and taking a tougher stance on China. Let's listen in to the final pitches of both the leaders.
That in uncertain times you can be certain that Labor has a plan to build Australia's future, and you can be certain that the coalition have cuts and chaos as the way that they've run this campaign. On polls, there's a lot of undecided voters. We have a mountain to climb. No one's been re-elected since 2000.
And this election is a referendum on the performance of the Albanese government over the last 3 years, and it's been a bad one. I haven't met an Australian on this campaign who said that they're better off today than they were 3 years ago. And this election is an opportunity to get rid of a bad government and to implement our positive plan for the country. A coalition will get our country back on track, and that's exactly.
From the economic ripple effects of Trump-era tariffs to the growing housing crisis, voters are weighing in on the policies that will define Australia's future. Energy, climate and environmental concerns remain central alongside persistent inflation, rising living costs and Australia's evolving relationship with China. Immigration, population growth and law and order are also key concerns for many voters. Meanwhile, families are watching closely for commitments to make childcare more affordable and accessible and to invest in stronger education outcomes. Economic management, interest rates and cost of living relief will also play a decisive role in how Australians vote. Adding an international twist, analysts say Donald Trump's global influence could sway undecided voters. Early polling shows a tight race, but Albanese remains the favourite, though he may need support from an independents to stay in power. Results will begin rolling in after polls close, with final tallies expected within days. We are joined by some guests today to discuss this election in Australia. Nicholas Smith, Federal Political Editor at the Nightly Media located in Canberra. We're also joined by Dr. Erin Watson, CEO, Baker and York, located in Melbourne. And we're also joined by Professor Matt Quortrup, Australian National University in Canberra. And we're also joined by Craig Hodges, Strategic Consultant located in Adelaide, Australia. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us in this discussion. The polls are now open. Nicola, thank you very much for joining us. We have seen a record number of Australians voting before this election. What makes this election different to the others, and why have so many Australians decided to participate this time in particular?
That's certainly a question that the major parties will be looking at. It's already a well-established phenomenon that Australians have this option to vote early, but we're seeing unprecedented numbers this time of people going to the polls, and that has presented a problem for the major parties in terms of when they release their policies, allowing time for their policies to land, and that's particularly being a challenge for the coalition, the opposition, who are seeking to oust the Prime Minister and the Labour Party, because they left many of their major flagship policies very late in the campaign. So whether that has an impact is something that there will be a post-mortem about, and that they really need to take a look at. And this high number of voters who've gone early to the polls, either through postal votes or through pre-polling stations, Many of them will have done so because they won't have been able to cast their vote on Saturday for work or for other personal reasons. But we also have seen voters really turning off politics as well, as they have been in many other democracies, and really disengaging with the major parties and what they have to say, and just not being interested anymore in what has been quite a flat campaign with a lack of bold ideas and big plans for the future.
Yes, and I want to move to Dr. Erin Watson next. That campaign is what I want to focus on with my next question. There are obviously two men at the centre of this, Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton. How would you assess their different approaches to their campaign strategies?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, I think if you asked me 3 weeks ago, would Peter Dutton be the next Prime Minister, I probably would have said yes. Whereas, you know, just sort of 3 days ago, we started to, or even really a week ago, started to realise that might not actually be the case. As Nicola has already said, I mean, some of those policies that, you know, were presented quite late in the campaign really sort of fell flat, I'd say, from both sides. I think both approaches from both parties has been very much around band-aid solutions rather than broader structural reform when it comes to those key issues at the moment, which are, well, depending on where you are in Australia. So, you know, if you're sitting down here in Melbourne, you know, people are talking about cost of living, particularly in the big cities where there has just been huge population growth, which is quite different to if you're sitting on the west coast of Australia, where I was 2 weeks ago, where you have a much older population, and their things that they're interested in are Anthony Albanese's proposed unrealised capital gains tax, things like taxation on large vehicles and so on. So it really does depend on where you are. But I guess my broader point is, when we sit back and look at what they're proposing to the Australian public, it's very much band-aid solutions, and we're not seeing bigger structural reforms around taxation, around things like childcare, you know, around things like inflation. We have been able to get under control but that we're not really tackling those big structural issues in this election. And I think that's why people are becoming, you know, disengaged. Well, I wouldn't say disengaged. I actually think that's wrong, but they've become disenfranchised when it comes to the major parties, both the Labor and the Liberal Party. And you see such a huge shift towards the Teals and the other independent candidates and the minor parties as well. That's really going to be, there's a real test there this election on whether or not those independents will get back up again, and we'll start to see what those broader, longer-term trends are politically here in Australia. So it's this election, I think, is going to tell us more about which way we're going and those broader, longer-term trends than it's going to be about any major change in this country.